writing on this subject. The university is our most important cultural institution, and preserving or refinding its credibility and excellence, in this case rescuing it from its present lack of credibility and excellence, is our highest civic duty. And what have students been learning, and what are they still learning? Students soon internalized the catechism. Western civilization thrived on white Christian Eurocentric aggression against others, capital O. Western literature and art are the patriarch's handmaidens. The university's mission is not about disinterested knowledge, but achieving the just society and empowering the wretched of the earth. Objective knowledge is a tool for one dominant race, gender, and sexuality to oppress the powerless. Reason is only one way of knowing. So, for instance, if Aboriginals' story that they have occupied Canada since time immemorial resists the historical truth that their ancestors crossed the Bering Strait 10,000 years ago, then Aboriginal truth must be privileged over actual history. And the same goes for gender, art, and family. All manifestations are equally valid. Most insidiously, acknowledging and rewarding objective merit is considered, quote, an institutionalized form of racism and classism. Strategies for eliminating intellectual debate on campus are manifold. Amongst them, disinviting politically incorrect speakers. That includes right-wing speakers, pro-life activists, and pro-Israel speakers who often need tough security on campuses, but strangely, never the other way around. We saw a prime example in the recent visit of right-wing gadfly Ann Coulter to the University of Ottawa. Eliminating neutral survey courses, but sanctioning group identity courses that are designed to promote activism, courses like womanhood, black feminists, as an English literature course. Preferential hiring by ideology and group identity rather than academic accreditation. Stifling speech codes to punish offensive language to women and minorities. And especially pernicious is the suppression of conservative voices in reading lists. And indeed, with a few notable exceptions, the entire rich tradition of conservative thought, including the disinterested study of religions and their complex intellectual legacy. Speaking of reading lists, I found it interesting in the course of research I did for a column on conservative content in public and university libraries that librarians are extremely liberal, more liberal even than professors. Much was made in the 2004 presidential election of the 11-to-1 ratio of university professors' donations to John Kerry's campaign over Bush. But compared to librarians, academics are Rush Limbaugh's fan club, because the Kerry-Bush ratio of librarians' donation was a stunning 223-to-1. Are Canadian librarians less ideological monolithic than their US colleagues? Well, I could find no statistics to make such a case. Still, at the Toronto Public Library, Canada's largest, the Bush Haters Handbook is readily available, but not Mark Stein's The Face of the Tiger, which, by the way, was not, at the time of my inquiries 2 years ago, carried in the public libraries of Winnipeg, Montreal, or Fredericton, or in the university libraries of Toronto, British Columbia, and McGill, even though it was a bestseller. A few years ago, I wrote about the politicization of campus teaching in a column, and I asked students and teachers to report back anecdotally on their experiences. I received over 100 responses, which, by the way, is a lot. You know, email, when you get 100 responses to anything, that means there's a strong interest out there. Detailing personal experiences in the classroom that would have been unthinkable in my day. In one case, a comparative politics teacher wouldn't admit The Economist magazine or Fraser Institute reports in another as source material because of their, quote, right-wing biased writers. An international relations professor pronounced political realism as a method of inquiry, quote, dead and inadmissible in argumentation. Political science students taught by a feminist were not permitted to use statistics to bolster an argument because, quote, mathematics is a male construct or a male dominant. A professor in a course on terrorism said, quote, No educated person can support Israel. Educated people don't have those kind of views. A feminist teacher in a school of nursing insisted that her male students, very few of course, participate in a Montreal massacre commemoration. When one refused, on the grounds that he is no more responsible for Mark Lepine's sins than his teacher is for Carla Homolka's, he was made to submit to corrective counseling. Several years ago, a McGill student took a semester-long course, Canadian-American Relations since 1939. His instructor, a PhD candidate, the student wrote me, was, quote, the most gifted teacher I've encountered at McGill. I haven't the faintest idea where he stands politically, and that's exactly how it should be. He received outstanding evaluations. He went on to say that the gifted teacher was replaced the next semester by a more qualified teacher who said all Canadian-American relations since 1939 would be viewed, quote, through a gay, lesbian, transsexual lens, and that they would devote part of the course to, quote, lesbians who are claiming refugee status in Canada after Bush's re-election. You know, this is stand-up comedy. I just make this stuff up. To be fair, my methodology is anecdotal and guilty of selection bias, and doubtless these seemingly absurd examples may not be said to be representative of all academic life in Canada. I have a young friend doing a PhD in Canadian history who assures me that the general mood in academia in his field is not nearly as extreme as it was in past decades, and that centrism and nonpartisanship is now the order of the day. But, I mean, that it's happening at all is disconcerting. What is common to all the anecdotal examples is evidence that the teacher sees his role as an advocate rather than as a dispenser of knowledge. The words academic and scholar are no longer interchangeable. To a scholar, his subject matter is of interest apart from what is at stake for any particular group. Scholars have their own biases, of course, but when engaged in teaching their discipline, they are careful to monitor the possible intrusions of their biases into the field of study. If you look at the humanities today, literature, psychology, sociology, or anthropology, they are dominated by a dual message of social mission and cultural blame. I'm now going to skip over some of the examples because if I did them all, they would take about 15 minutes. But if you want to ask me, one example is immigration and settlement studies at Ryerson. One is disability studies, a fairly new, I've written about this, a fairly new field of studies that looked on its face to be very good, has turned into a Marxist, oh thank you, a Marxist sort of activism group. Anthropology, very good examples there, what's happened. Okay, how is conservative thought, thank you. How is conservative thought faring in the universities?